Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné, our top stories. COP28 delivers a new deal which for the first time calls on all nations to move away from using fossil fuels. But what does it mean for oil and gas producing countries? A bittersweet return for dozens of Tunisians from the Gaza Strip. They managed to escape heavy bombardments via Egypt, leaving many behind. An all-female band in Chad is on a quest to empower women and combat gender-based discrimination. Les Aunties want to help the next generation from repeating their mistakes. It took 2 weeks and almost a collapse of talks about climate change. In the end, a deal was secured at COP28. Member states have agreed in Dubai on a deal calling on all nations to transition away from using fossil fuels, oil, gas and coal, the main responsibles of climate change. Sam Radpiece explains what it means.
The initial draft of the COP28 climate deal was very clear. It called for fossil fuels to be phased out. This would have been useful in terms of limiting emissions and global warming. But the final, watered-down version of the text uses softer language, which is worrying climate scientists. It calls to transition away from fossil fuels. A subtle difference, but one that was very much pushed for by a number of major oil-producing states, including some in Africa, such as Nigeria. The government here in Senegal will also probably be relieved with the final wording of the text, given that it plans to begin exporting oil and gas largely to the European Union as soon as next year. In the long term, any failure to curb emissions will likely have disastrous consequences for the African continent, notably in the form of crop failure, drought, and public health. There has been some progress towards climate finance, helping developing countries adapt to climate change, but Africa is still well short of the $2.8 trillion needed between 2020 and 2030 in order to deal with the problem of climate change.
And COP28 has also been an opportunity to address a series of climate challenges Africa faces, including energy access and green infrastructure.
We had 4 key objectives. Number 1 was to advocate for increased climate finance. Number 2 was on the issue of energy access, And then number 3, we also had the issue of greening of Africa's infrastructure. Number 4 was on scaling of adaptation in Africa. What we were hoping to do is to be able to, for example, find ways of having more partners to support, to complement us in the energy access journey.
And we know now if Africa contributes to just a fraction of global carbon emissions, the continent is also the most vulnerable to climate change. In Tunisia, with recurring droughts, water low levels and high temperatures are pushing many to adapt. In the construction sector, for example, architects are trying to find less energy-consuming and less polluting materials, often going back to traditional methods. Our correspondent reports.
In this factory in Tunisia's north, the red color of the soil comes from nearby old iron mines. They provide a valuable mix for making earth bricks. Producing them takes less energy than is used for standard terracotta bricks.
Making the compressed soil bricks only requires 120 kilowatts, while the red bricks require a lot more. The whole factory runs on the power of a house.
Laying these bricks also requires very little cement, and cement uses a lot of water.
It assembles really easily. They fit together like this, so it uses about 90% less cement.
This factory has been selling locally and for export for 10 years. Industry-wide increases in the cost of materials and electricity used in construction has recently sparked growth in more sustainable business models.
I wanted to make this house eco-friendly, but it's also cheaper. It cost me nearly half the price.
Awareness is growing about the financial and ecological cost in building. Like in Djerba in the south, here, architects built this children's association using recycled materials and traditional techniques.
We chose to go back to the local architecture of the region of Djerba. So it's the vaults, which give more space and ventilation. And that helps the temperature stay cool in the summer and hot in the winter.
The floor is made from scraps of marble, the furniture from recycled plastic and tires. The architects also share construction tips on their free platform Ebnicolo. They're hoping to encourage others to take a more ecologically sensitive approach to building tomorrow's world.
More than 200 Tunisians live in the Gaza Strip. Dozens of them have managed to get evacuated through Egypt's Rafah crossings after weeks of bombardments. It's a return to safety with mixed emotion, as Caroline Lambouli describes.
The sense of relief was bittersweet as dozens of Tunisian citizens and their family members landed in Tunis after they were evacuated from the Gaza Strip via Egypt. After weeks of Israeli bombardment on the blockaded territory, many of them weren't able to hold back their tears.
I'm really happy to be in Tunisia and very, very happy that we arrived safely after everything we saw and felt.
We arrived at the Rafah crossing through our own means, without the intervention of any international institution whatsoever. The Tunisian embassy got involved from the moment we reached the crossing.
According to the Tunisian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 57 people were evacuated. They were first brought by bus to Cairo before boarding a flight for Tunis. A representative from the ministry said their evacuation was difficult because it took place after the truce ended. Dozens of Tunisians remain in the Gaza Strip. Official numbers issued by the Tunisian authorities put the number of nationals living in the enclave at 250. Tunisia has also taken in a number of wounded Palestinians from the Gaza Strip for treatment. In this video, the Tunisian president can be seen holding a child before she was due to enter surgery. According to the Tunisian authorities, most of the wounded who were transferred from Gaza had suffered shrapnel wounds, burns, as well as broken limbs.
Elections Day in DRC is fast approaching, and not all voting materials have been distributed, especially in hard-to-reach areas. The government is asking for help to the United Nations, and the UN mission, known as MONUSCO, is already helping in the eastern provinces of Ituri, North Kivu, and South Kivu. But the Kinshasa government wants the mission's logistical support to be extended to other provinces. MONUSCO says it's waiting for the go-ahead from the Security Council. And for many voters, the security situation in eastern DRC remains a major issue, including for the diaspora. In Belgium, some members want to draw attention to their country and denounce the indifference of the West. Alix Le Bourdon and Dave Keating are in Brussels.
Poor network quality doesn't always make it possible, but as soon as she can, Maddie Tiembe gets news from Goma.
Mama Isaac!
These two women are part of the 7 million displaced people in eastern DRC. There, armed groups are terrorizing the population.
We fled the rebels who relentlessly pursued us. We sleep outside without having a place to lay our heads. I was with my neighbor, but she died. Her head was cut off after torturing her to death.
Maddie has heard stories like these for over 20 years, but recently the situation has gotten worse and she's overcome with emotion.
I'm so sorry, because here in Belgium it seems like people don't care. Our hope, unfortunately, is dwindling. There's fighting. There are 3 more days of very, very, very violent fighting.
Indifference is also what this Congolese man, who wants to remain anonymous, denounces. He comes from the ranks of the Combattants, a group made up of members of the diaspora who seek to raise awareness about the situation in DRC, sometimes in a violent manner. He says he won't vote in the next elections.
Elections cannot be organised in an occupied country. Today in the Congo, we are in a situation where Rwanda continues to attack us. There are the M23 rebels, a movement financed by Rwanda that continues to occupy the country.
In the meantime, more than 60 years after the independence of Congo from Belgium, the parliaments of the two countries have signed a cooperation agreement.
In Europe and here in Belgium, which has a fairly blatant historical link with the Democratic Republic of Congo, I am shocked that very few people dare to raise their voices.
For this academic, there is little hope that the next election will change the situation.
A good part of the province of North Kivu and even the province of Ituri will not vote. Why? Well, because these are regions where armed groups are active, and I have difficulty seeing how the Commission will be able to organise elections in these territories.
The only glimmer of hope for these populations is that the future president seeks to meet security expectations in these regions.
Singing against gender-based violence, an all-female Chadian band is on a quest to empower women. All 8 members of Les Antilles have fallen victims to domestic violence, and now they want to help the next generation from repeating their mistakes. Laurent Bersécher.
Using the power of music to transcend their traumatic past, Chadian band Les Antilles is composed of 8 women, all survivors of gender-based violence, who now advocate for female emancipation in the West African country.
Because of our past experiences, we try to give advice to young girls. We tell them to focus on their studies, to work hard for their future, and not rush into marriage.
Like many women in Chad, Somti Naringar married young. Her husband then took on 4 more wives and started to become violent.
My husband hit me on a daily basis. When my first child was 6 months old, he even broke my arm.
Joining the Aunties helped Naringar get away from her violent marriage and gave her a new lease on life. The band combines modern and traditional instruments to weave tales of adversity and empowerment, a way for the Aunties to tell their stories and help guide younger generations towards a better path.
They tend to brush aside everything that was tragic in their lives, to put it in the past, and instead be people who no longer present themselves as victims, but rather as role models.
According to UNICEF, more than 60% of girls in Chad marry before the age of 18, making it one of the countries with the highest rate of child marriage in the world.
And with these strong women, we end this edition. Thank you for watching this edition of Eye on Africa. Stay tuned for more news.